to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Season 5 of Raising Teens. I'm your host, Collett Smart. I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and also a parent in the middle of raising my own teen and young adult children. I started this podcast because I know that many teens are struggling, and I wanted to create an online village of support for parents. I'm joined again this season by well-known experts on teen mental health and well-being. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is jam-packed with support so that you can get on with the job that you do best. That is, connecting with and loving your teen. Meg McClintock is an accredited practicing dietitian with 20 years of experience across both public and private healthcare settings. She's founder and principal dietitian at Choose Nutrition and has a special interest in challenging eating behavior, disordered eating, weight and body image concerns. Meg has presented on weight-inclusive healthcare and the non-diet approach to GPs, pediatricians, exercise physiologists, psychologists, dietitians, and dietetic students for the past 5 years. Meg is passionate about eating disorder prevention and doing no harm when addressing eating and weight concerns across the lifespan. I thought it was the perfect time of year to have Meg on the podcast as we are approaching Christmas and all of those end-of-year festivities. During this time, it's common for us to have lots of food, desserts, perhaps alcohol, and the most common New Year's resolution is around exercise and losing weight. In this episode, we really want to focus on the importance of health rather than getting beach body ready. Hello, Meg. Welcome to Raising Teens.
Oh, hi, Collett. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to see you.
So, Meg, you and I probably met more than 10 years ago. I worked with your husband, Dan, at a school in Sydney. He's moved on and is head of school elsewhere now. Your eldest was in preschool at the time,
wow.
and he's now in high school.
Yeah.
I know. So anyway, I remember just being amazed when I met you because I think you were the first non-diet dietitian that I had ever met. And I loved your philosophies and your ideas on food and healthy bodies. So for me, I know nutrition is so important to our overall health and our well-being, and we tend to really get fixated on diet and body size. I mean, it's everywhere. It's on billboards still. It's on media. It's in movies. It's on reality shows. I briefly spoke on the podcast with Sarah McMahon, and we spoke about the concept of disconnecting health from weight and appearance. So as a non-diet dietitian, could you give us a bit of an explanation on why this is important to move away of these fixations on body size and dieting, especially because I still see many dietitians and nutritionists focusing on weight loss as the ultimate goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been the norm for a really, really long time. So, when I went through uni 20 years ago, we were in that, what we'd call that weight-centric system, which is really having weight and weight loss as a proxy for health, as a central thing that the message is you can't be healthy unless you are in this so-called healthy weight range. And so what we need to do for anyone who's outside of that range is force their body up or down to get them into that range, and that's how they attain health. But if you look at a lot of the research that disconnects health from behaviours, you see that actually that goes away. That association between health and body size actually goes away when you look at, well, what are people actually doing? Because weight isn't a behaviour. I think that's the other thing that needs to be really front and centre is when someone says, I need to lose weight to be healthy, well, weight loss isn't a behaviour. What are the actual behaviours that we are doing and that are accessible for people of all sizes that can actually help move them along and be engaged in sort of health promoting or health sustaining behaviours. So someone might say, I need to lose weight. And whereas a non-diet approach will be like, well, would it be good for you to increase your physical activity? Would it be good for you to add more vegetables to your eating or reduce your alcohol or whatever? And weight may or may not change as a result of those behaviours, but they're still worth doing and they still promote health, and they're going to be accessible for people of all sizes. And people are like, I am actually engaging in health promoting behaviours. I am thinking about health broadly, not just on physical health, but also thinking how my mental health, my social health, this is all really part of health. Whereas when we have this idea that to be healthy, you have to be in a certain weight range, it's just unattainable for a lot of people. And we can go into a little bit about sort of the risks of pursuing weight loss and the likely outcome of pursuing weight loss. But we end up with people who are sitting in that weight range feeling like they're destined to be unhealthy forever. They are unhealthy and they have to be doing something. And just that stress that they can live with day in, day out can absolutely be negatively impacting their health. And so I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about weight stigma, which is the impact of living in a body that the culture is saying is wrong, creates a lot of stress, and that stress can negatively affect our physical health. And a lot of the things that are often attributed to body size can actually be attributed to that stress and that stigma.
That's so true. Just as you've touched on stigma there, as I mentioned, in the media and everywhere we turn, it's the smaller bodies, particularly for women, it's the smaller body size, the slight body that's kind of celebrated as the one to have, or the healthy body, when in fact that person could be chain smoking, living on caffeine and not eating fruit and vegetables and barely exercising.
Absolutely.
And somehow we hold that up as the healthy body. And I think a lot of this I learned from you and others.
Yeah, it's just that disconnect again from behaviours, that actually our health is broad and the behaviours that we're engaging in is an important part of that health. And so what happens for people who are in sort of healthy weight range but aren't engaging in those health promoting behaviours, things can get missed. Things can get missed, and they can turn sort of acute things into chronic things, or they can be really, having some significant health risks that get missed because they just got of assumed health, at the same way that assumed poor health of people in larger bodies, which is not the case either. And so we really can't make assumptions about what people are eating, how people are moving, how people are sleeping, what they're stressed, what they're smoking, the risk-taking behaviour, drugs, all these other, parts that make up health. We can make no assumptions based on someone's body size. And look, I work with a lot of people with significant eating disorders of course of all sizes as well. And when someone walks in my room for a consult, if I haven't got much of a referral, I'm going to have no idea based on their body size, except for the very, very pointy ends. I'm going to have no idea what is actually going on for this person, or even why they're seeking help from me. I can have people in larger bodies who are engaging some of the most restrictive, like anorexia, all of the distress, all of the fear of weight gain, all of the restriction, all of the complications of that starvation syndrome. But most people would have no idea that could even exist in someone in that body. Or I can see someone in a smaller body with terrible dietary quality and no movement, and who wants some help with that. You can't tell.
There are still so many assumptions about what a healthy body looks like. This changes constantly depending on your time in history. We know this, but it may be important to reinforce it with your teens. For a long time, we spoke about Photoshop in traditional media, showing unachievable celebrity bodies. But today, many teens are using apps and filters before uploading their own images to social media. So in many ways, we're still celebrating and normalizing certain physiques that are just impossible for some bodies to attain in real life. We will be chatting specifically about the effects of social media on body image next season, so look out for that.
What we're trying to do with the non-diet approach is let's make sure that people get access to the evidence-based treatment for the condition that they have, not treating them differently because of their weight, because we do hear that all the time. An example that I often try to give to clients, particularly if they've got that internalized weight stimulus, they think, I need to lose weight for insert whatever condition here. Plantar fasciitis is the classic one. And I use this one because I had it. So they'll say, look, I have to lose weight because I've got plantar fasciitis, which is like inflammation of a tendon in your foot. And so I went to the doctor and said I had to lose weight. And I go, they give you any other advice? They talk about orthotics. They talk about going to see a physio. They talk about, some pain relief, anything like that. Oh, no, I just have to lose weight. But, okay, well, I went to the physio for my plantar fasciitis. To the doctor, I got sent to a physio, a podiatrist. I had a load. I was told to reduce my exercise. And so my acute condition got dealt with, and it was an acute condition, and I moved on. But if someone continues to exercise despite the pain, push, not get the supportive footwear, not get the physiotherapy, they can turn what could have been an acute issue into a chronic issue, which is going to negatively impact their ability to exercise for the next 20, 30 years. So what a non-diet approach is, okay, who's in front of me? What's the condition? And let's make sure that if this person came in, and I don't use BMI, but there's a whole lot of issues with that. But if someone came in to me and they had a BMI within the ideal healthy weight range, however you want to phrase it, what advice would I give them for the condition that they're presenting with? Okay, but let's make sure that that's at the very least, the people who's in front of us get that evidence-based advice for the condition, not one set of recommendations for someone who has that same condition but is in a larger body, compared to someone who has that condition and is in a smaller body.
And so as we come to focusing now on teens, particularly as you've now framed the non-diet approach, in teens, who may be struggling with things like plantar fasciitis and other issues that you raised, if they just walk into a doctor's room and they either put on a scale and a judgment is made about their weight based on what the scale says or the size of their body, that can really impact so much going forward for that young person. So are there any common reasons that you tend to see teenagers specifically for? And as I'm talking about this, you mentioned BMI. Could you explain to our listeners also what BMI is, particularly if you talk about this around teenagers?
Yeah, not a problem. So BMI, the body mass index, was created, in the 1800s, like a long time ago, by a mathematician on a very narrow range ethnically of people just wanting to go, what's the spread of body size? It was never intended to be a health measure. It was just this guy was interested in statistics. Unfortunately, because it's really easy, so it's just your weight divided by your height squared, it started getting used to sort of determine health, and then by insurance companies started determining health more so in America than Australia, and then by the whole medical establishment as determining health, as opposed to, so look, because there are associations. So I guess I've got to be careful. The non-diet approach isn't saying there aren't associations between higher weights and increased morbidity and mortality or increased chronic disease. That is true, but what it is saying is we don't necessarily have to force the body into a different size to mitigate those risks. Just the way that we know that male pattern baldness is associated with cardiac disease, we don't expect that by giving a guy a toupee or plugs is going to reduce his cardiovascular disease. There are two things that are co-occurring that aren't necessarily caused to each other. So BMI, unfortunately, is used really, really commonly, and it basically classifies someone as okay or not okay and should be changing. And it's really inappropriate to be used in kids, particularly because of the way that growth patterns work, but it does get used. So if anyone ever is told, based on their BMI, there's something wrong with their health, nope. Really important that people understand that it's a statistical mathematician who's come up with it, and it was never meant to be a health measure. And you can be engaging in health-promoting behaviours, have good metabolic health, have good social health, have good physical health, even if your BMI is in the range that perhaps your doctor or PE teacher or someone is saying is not okay. So the issue is that living with that, there's something wrong with my body, is already happening for teenagers, even those teenagers who they are in that healthy weight range. Our whole culture of what's acceptable bodies and what's not, our whole culture of what's valued and of what that might say about someone, the assumptions that get made, is such tricky waters for teenagers to navigate anyway. I guess to go back to that sort of question about, what am I seeing adolescents for. Unfortunately, the majority of the adolescents I see, I'm seeing them for eating disorders or for disordered eating. And a lot of them are brought to me because their parents are concerned about their weight, or because they're concerned about their weight. They would like to lose weight. And then with a little bit of conversation, a little bit of digging, we actually expose or unravel that there's a significant eating disorder here, or really disordered eating, or just feeling lost. Like our food culture is so difficult to navigate. And so sometimes people are just, they're feeling really, really lost, and they want to engage in health behaviors. They want to eat well. They want to look after their health, not just their weight. But they don't know how to do it, because our culture is either you're on a diet, you're counting your calories, or you're counting your almonds, and you're fasting at this time and you're eating at that time, and either you're sort of following some sort of external program, or you're off the wagon for, you're eating everything and you're not paying any attention to nutrition. Like that's the pole that, what most people have experienced. And people are dieting younger and younger. And so even by the time I see teenagers, sometimes they went on their first diet at 8, or they copied their mum's first diet at 8, or they started using, we've got kids shake, we've got the man shake and the lady shake, and now we've got the kids, the one for kids, which is sold as, oh, this is really convenient. But it's that cultural message of this is about body size, this is about weight loss.
And I think, Meg, they even, as you say that, it's making me think our kids are even hearing this in the curriculum,
Yes.
in PE, PDHPE curriculum.
Yes.
And they are put on scales in classroom. I'm still horrified when I hear schools popping kids on scales.
Yeah.
In the classroom to compare or measure.
Yes.
I can't fathom that that's still happening.
Yes. I think there's been a little bit of progress in some places, but yeah, it still happens. And the one that I think is possibly even worse than that is the assignments of go in MyFitnessPal and track your calories. Every eating disorder therapist and dietitian that I know will have at least one client whose eating disorder was triggered by that assignment. Of course, on a cultural background, like the culture loads the gun and then something pulls the trigger. And so it's really difficult to navigate. And so a lot of compassion around that. It's difficult for parents to navigate. They want their kids to be healthy. And because our culture does victimize and bully and tease people in larger bodies and treat them worse, like it's okay to, in our culture, parents want their kids to avoid that. So if they do have a child who's in a larger body, naturally, genetically, or for whatever reason, the answer that our culture has is to avoid being treated badly because of your size, you need to change your size. And in no other area do we accept that the victim of the bullying is responsible for avoiding the bullying by changing. We don't accept that. If someone's being bullied because of their skin color, we don't go, well, maybe if you change your skin color, you wouldn't get bullied anymore. But when it comes to body size as a culture, we kind of go, oh, well, bully's got a point. Maybe you should.
If your teen mentions being bullied because of their weight, it's a natural reaction for you as a parent to want to protect your child from that. So your first response might be, oh, I need to help them lose weight. But if your teen is being bullied, may I recommend that you take them to see a psychologist first rather than a dietitian.
And so from a feeling safe point of view, from a feeling accepted, from feeling okay in their body, from all of those foundational things can just get evaporated by that messaging, which is often well-intentioned.
Yeah. And so in light of all of these messages that our young people get from culture and particularly online, how do you advise that we talk to our teens about food and their bodies in healthy ways?
Yeah, so it's that decentering of weight is probably the main thing. Trying to actually disconnect health and food from body size. Because again, we've got really good data that shows that people in the different, BMI categories, because they're used in research, have similar intakes of food. The same sort of percentages of people have, high quality diets and low quality diets across the body weight spectrums. And so we really need to disconnect that. Eating for well-being, not eating for weight loss, and trying to stay in touch with their bodies. And for teenagers, hopefully a lot of them have got that good connection. So when we're born, when we're little, we're really intuitive with what we need to eat. Our bodies, we know when we're hungry, we know when we're full. You'll see little kids at parties, they'll take 2 bites of something, they'll leave it on the plate. They might eat lots one day and then not much the next day. And they just sort of They just sort of work it out by staying in their body. But then because of our anxiety around body size in our culture, quite often that gets undermined. It's like, you can't possibly eat all of that. No, before you eat that, you have to eat that. Eat your veggies and then you can have your dessert. And so we actually start to undermine that body trust. You see it in teens all the time, and particularly for girls, unfortunately. So when a boy's going through puberty and parents are like, oh, I can't feed him. He's eating me out of house and home. He's eating this and he's eating so much food. He's eating so much food. And oh my goodness, it's so amazing. I can't believe it. Everyone's like, cool, that's fine. When the same period of growth is happening for girls, the same increase in appetite, the same increase in energy requirements and expected weight gain in that period of time, instead of, wow, you're growing and you need all this, it's, ooh, should you be eating that? Oh, be careful. Oh, you don't want to gain too much weight. So again, it's that pathologizing of normal growth, that pathologizing of normal weight gain, because culturally we've gotten to a point where there is this strong belief that any weight gain is bad. We've got evidence with 5 and 6-year-olds who think that their ideal body is smaller than their current body, and they've only got growing ahead of them. When I talk to groups of teenagers and say, you're expected to gain, 15 kilos or so in the next little while, they're gobsmacked. They can't believe it. That idea is so scary to them.
It's such a positive message, though.
Yeah.
For somebody to actually say, you know what, that's expected and
Normal.
it's wonderful
Yes.
because your body is growing and you're maturing and you're becoming a young adult.
Yes.
And
yes.
as you talk about that idea of food, particularly around women and girls, I have such a distinct memory on the playground in high school that I just would not eat in front of anybody. And I still see it where girls are still too embarrassed to eat. They're afraid of what people might comment on what's in their lunch.
Yeah, or being the only one, or comments. And they do get comments. And that's the problem, is because when I'm working with, particularly with people with insoles who need to eat really regularly and they're going to need to eat at school, they say, you want to on one hand say, oh, people, minimize it because the insole is going to push it to make it even a bigger fear than it needs to be. Like, people aren't really paying that much attention to you, but then they will get a comment from a teacher or from a friend. And the again, different schools are different. Some schools seem to, I don't know what it is, but some schools seem to be a bit better. Others where the teenage girl's not eating is just the norm. And so I might have clients who I know are in the same year at school. They don't know that I'm seeing both of them. And they're both saying, I really want to, and I'm really hungry, but I'd be the only one. And I'm like, how many people are sitting there lunchtime going, I would love to be eating, but I'll be the only one. We need to make the culture that it's normal to eat and it's abnormal to not eat. We've really got it flipped.
If you notice your teen being constantly embarrassed to eat in front of others or seeming to be a really picky eater, avoiding certain foods or meals or hiding food, it's important to talk with your GP about a referral to a professional. If you would like to understand this area a bit more, in Season 4, Episode 8, I spoke with psychologist and eating disorders specialist Sarah McMahon.
Well, usually it's on an individual basis. So I'm working with a school on a return to school program for someone. So on that, it's looking at it's community, getting friends. Okay, who's going to be eating with you? But this is like a planned thing. There's a teacher and they're going to eat their lunch while the kids are eating their lunch, and the best friend's going to come and they're going to eat their lunch. Just really normalise that. I think it goes under the radar a little bit, particularly because people are busy. And so, they might be doing, I'm a choir at this lunchtime and I'm doing that extra thing at this lunchtime. So it can be really easy to not eat. And for some kids, it'll be fine, right? They're resilient. They'll just eat when they get home. They'll eat half the cupboard and everything will be fine. But for other kids, it's actually really, really difficult and harmful and tricky for them to overcome that anxiety. So I think we need to normalise eating. Like when I was at school, I wasn't allowed to eat in public in my school uniform.
Wow.
And I don't know if if that's part of it for some people. There's a hangover that there's something shameful about eating or something embarrassing about eating, and we shouldn't be eating, even though we all need to eat several times a day.
And so as parents, when you talk about normalising eating, what does that look like in practical terms?
So obviously all foods are not nutritionally equal, but trying to have the feeling that all foods are equal on that sort of moral issue. Unless you stole the food, you're not bad. for eating a donut. Is the donut nutritionally different to an apple? Yes, but it's still okay to be part of a part of eating. Really trying to understand that nutrition is not the only reason to eat. Like if I said to you, oh, hey, Collett, we've come up with this amazing new technology that there's this pill, you just take the pill twice a day and it gives you all the nutrition you need and you'll never have to eat again. I imagine you wouldn't be excited by that. You'd be like, oh, that's a bummer, because food isn't just about nutrition. It's about connection. It's about deliciousness and pleasure. Like it tastes great.
And culture.
Culture. And when we care for people, like when someone's going through a hard time, what do? We take them a meal.
That's right. There's
also things like convenience that can really matter. If you get really rigid with your eating to the point you'll only eat certain things or can only eat at home, whatever, then there's going to be a lot of times where you'll be hungry and unable to listen to your body and unable to honour that hunger if you can't make do and be like, you know what, it's not my favourite thing, but just going to pop into this fast food thing and grab something because otherwise I'm not going to get to eat for 5 hours. I'm not going to be able to concentrate and I'm not going to be able to work.
That's so true because, my son, like many teenagers, plays different sports and we're in basketball season and at the moment, there's one night a week where I am sitting outside the basketball court for hours while he's practicing and my husband's off in a different direction. And on those days, we just sometimes can't get to cook a nutritious meal. And so on some days, it's toasties or takeout.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
That's actually okay.
It's okay because there's more to life than perfect eating. And perfect eating doesn't actually guarantee you perfect health anyway. And so having that broader picture of health and well-being and life and being able to make do is actually really, really important. Flexibility is really, really important. So really having that all foods fit, we're trying to, break down that good food, bad food mentality, thinking about how foods make us feel. And, again, back to that sort of, I was talking about kids, they're pretty intuitive about that. And they often learn, the hard way that when you do not eat any vegetables for a week, you feel pretty rubbish because you get constipated and you're tired. Or if you go to a party and you eat too much party food, well, you feel a bit rubbish and that's okay. Your body can handle it. And we didn't really like feeling like that. So maybe next time, what can we do next time or how can we get through that? So it's, doing that, finding what is going to be in those different situations. How can I make the decision that's aligned with my values? And again, different people are going to have values around food and nutrition. Some people are going to value convenience or cooking locally or free range or whatever. And other people are not going to have either the ability to because of where they are socioeconomically or where they are with what their kids will eat and what they can afford. If their kids are not going to eat it, got autism, they're in a really limited diet, well, we need to acknowledge that's going to be more difficult. So it's that really understanding food is really complicated. It is complicated because it's values, it's health, with your family history, your money, what your experiences were growing up, what your beliefs are, what your assumptions are. Like there's so much stuff tied up under the ground. I often will draw this sort of picture of a tree with my clients and be like, okay, so you've come around wanting to change some behaviours. So even if you've really you've seen, it's about weight loss, I'm like, well, what are the behaviours that you think, you might want to change? So the behaviours are sort of like the big part of the tree, the bit that you notice, really obvious. Gives you some clues. Okay, cool. Well, what's feeding that? Because if we think that just education or just telling someone you should have 5 serves of veggies and 2 serves of fruit is going to change the tree, it's kind of like watering the leaves. Sometimes it can be, you can white knuckle it for a little while, but it's not really where the change comes from. So the trunk, that's going to be sort of our thoughts and feelings, which are really directly going to impact our behaviours. But even more when it comes to food, under the ground, complicated stuff under there around values, around beliefs, around assumptions, around experiences, it's all going to be there. So when I'm talking to families, like, okay, what can we put under the ground here that's going to help this person for the rest of their life to have thoughts and feelings about food and bodies that lead to behaviours where they're caring for their body, lead to the behaviours where they are respecting their body. They don't have to love it. They don't have to think it's amazing, but can they care for it? Can they respect it? Can they honour it?
I think it's fascinating because as parents, then a lot of that comes back to us modelling, but also looking at some of the behaviours we were engaged in or the ways the messages we got as children or as teenagers from our culture or our families or whatever it was.
Absolutely.
And so we almost have to relearn with our children and just explicitly say that, outwardly say that to your children. You know what, I'm relearning this relationship with my body and food, and I want to do this better with you, and then model that.
Absolutely, for sure. And that certainly will come in around dieting. I think an example of that, which is more simplistic but makes the point, is if you go back to the tree. If someone's experiences growing up was they had to clean their plate, and no matter what, they had to eat everything that was on their plate, and they're finding it really difficult to not eat everything on their kids' plate, or to not, they're often eating past the point of comfort, and it doesn't feel good, and they don't want to be doing that. But they're doing it for a reason, because if they don't do that, they feel uncomfortable. Thoughts and feelings that pop up for them is discomfort, because their experience over and over and over again is, I should finish this, I got to finish this. And so then the behaviors they're going to.
A lot of that I've heard comes from some of the war times,
Absolutely,
or the post-war behaviors of our grandparents, where there were rations, and so you had to eat what there was. And so it was, this then speaks into just what you've been saying. It's complicated because there were so many facets to that in the past.
Yeah. And even when I was growing up, there was the famine in Somalia, and it was, we're going to send, if you don't, think of the starving children in Africa. And that's a great sentiment. I get that. And it actually does entrench some stuff around those behaviors around eating. And so unfortunately, then if we go back to the difficulty of navigating our culture, the cultural messages are, there's one way to eat. There's a right or wrong for eating. You've got to get it right, otherwise everything's going to be terrible. And if you can't stay on this diet, it's because you failed, without any acknowledgement of, no, the diet just doesn't work. I use the metaphor of, it's kind of like the diet is the life jacket that you put on that suffocates you. And when you take it off because you can't breathe and start to drown, the manufacturer of the life jacket says, well, if you left the jacket on, you wouldn't have drowned. I mean, you might have
suffocated,
passed out and died anyway. And that's, again, we have a really, really powerful and very, there's billions of dollars in the diet industry. And the message that it constantly repeats is, the diet works, you failed because you couldn't stick to it. But if we look at the data, over 95% of people who lose weight intentionally through dieting will regain that weight, often with interest, within 2 to 5 years. If that was a car and 95% of people were crashing this particular car, we're not going to look at the F1 driver and go, well, they can keep it on the road. We're going to be like, the car is broken. The car is not suitable for the general public. This is not okay. But unfortunately, the narrative is so strong. You couldn't stick to the diet. If you just stuck to the diet, if you just found the right diet and you just did it, if you had more willpower, if you did all this sort of stuff, then you would be able to do it. Completely disconnecting all those other things that are loaded into our relationship with food, our relationship with our body, our upbringing, our budgets, all the other moving parts. It's a really harsh, and there's not much compassion in that approach at all.
And so then, Meg, if I have someone who is listening, who's thinking, well, the child in my care keeps reaching for junk food or doesn't seem to listen to their bodies and know when to stop eating, how do we support those parents?
Yeah, for sure. Again, the reaching for junk food is the behaviour, and I'd want to go digging because sometimes they're actually feeling really overly restricted by junk food. It's not often very often, or they feel they shouldn't be having it. So when they do get the opportunity to have it, they go overboard because they're like, I don't know when I'm going to get this again. So I'm going to have more of it now. Okay. Teenagers love junk food as well. That's just, it's delicious, it's convenient. They might just have their license and they just want to go through that drive-through 6,000 times because the novelty is there. That's also, that's also part of it.
I know.
So sometimes it's
the $1 slushy.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's write it out. Some of the advice is write it out. This is a teenage thing. And you know what? Keep in tune with their body. Once they're paying it for themselves and they realize how expensive it is, the evidence is that mostly kids end up eating pretty similarly to how their parents eat. So again, keep modelling the conversation like, I'm really surprised that you have Macca's again. I feel really rubbish. I have Macca's twice in a week. That's really, how's it feel in your body? Oh, okay, cool. So without the judgment, try not to bring up any shame, but really trying to sort of connect that, going, oh, that's really expensive. Like, what are you going to, what are the other parts in that? Why do you like it? Trying to understand, to get them to tune in, because they might actually be like, oh, it's just my friends are doing it. I don't really like it, but I want to do it because my friends are doing it. Okay, well then that's a thing to weigh up for them as well. Sometimes it could be that they're It's really accessible. It's always the same. And so if someone's not eating enough or has sort of anxiety around food, texture, sensory issues, then it can be a really predictable, easy thing. When we let ourselves get too hungry, and this is sort of where intuitive eating can be really helpful to try to encourage that connection with not just the I'm starving and I'm stuffed, but actually knowing that sort of in between. Because once we are starving, once we are down and we're so hungry, we don't care as much about nutrition. The sort of prefrontal cortex, the reason part of the brain.
I know. When I walk into the grocery store.
Yes, and shopping hungry, right?
I know.
I don't even like this.
When I'm hungry shopping.
So when we're really, really, really hungry, we don't care as much. Prefrontal cortex, little offline, main part of the brain, like survival part of the brain is just like, get me food. Much more likely to be upsized.
Yep, there's heaps of chips in my trolley at that point.
And so having access, if I get home and I'm really, really hungry and there's a pack of chips in the cupboard, or, well, I guess I could make myself an omelette, or I guess I could make myself something. I'm going to do the easy option. So having other options accessible as well, making sure that they're not getting too hungry. So packing the lunchbox, packing the afternoon tea, making sure that there are times when they're not find themselves really, really, really hungry, and that's the only option. So there's a lot of it's going to be structural, sort of making sure that predictable routine with eating and enough food, and that often starts younger as well. So it's really difficult to change a feeding dynamic once kids are sort of 15 plus. So often a lot of the work that I try to do is getting people sort of in that younger age of predictable routines, parents doing the sort of the what, where, when, and the kids deciding how much, if any. So there's sort of that working with appetite, staying in tune with appetite, knowing that, got to eat enough now because there's not going to be anything for a couple of hours. And then that can carry on. So teenagers are doing less mindless or non-hungry eating, which we all do some of. It's fine to do some of, but we want to sort of be predominantly listening to our hunger, listening to our fullness, and honouring that as much as possible.
And so then, Meg, what is your hope for your work with families and their nutrition?
Yeah, it's a good question. My hope is that it will get easier and that it'll get less complicated, and that we'll broaden our views on health. My hope is that our society's values get less driven by the dieting industry and the beauty industry and the celebrity industry and all of that on these unattainable, for most people, and unsustainable values around bodies that we look like, to more meaningful things, to things that are accessible for people. If you're genetically never going to safely have a body that matches up with what you're seeing on Instagram, if that's what you believe your value lies, then you are really going to be set up for a life fighting your body, working against it, and feeling like you never measure up and feeling like you're not enough. And so I really am hoping for a shift away from all of those physical beauty ideals and thin ideals to values that matter and values that are more lasting and that are more sustainable.
Meg's reminder to focus on health rather than a number on the scales is something we all need reminding about. Look out for Meg's upcoming webinars and online course with her colleague Susan Williams. These will be for families wanting to protect their homes and their kids from diet culture. You can find out more about this and the non-diet dietitian approach at choosenutrition.com.au. You can also find me or leave a question for a future episode via email or my Facebook page or via raisingteens.au. Or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.